everyone, to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast. I am Hugs Not Drugs today. I'm your narrator. And meet the characters. We have John Barleycorn, same voice as me. We have Dr. Uggs. Say something, Dr. Uggs.
This is going to be a good one, I'm telling you. We're talking about something that is in plain sight, but it's very little talked about. And sometimes it's the first time that anybody uses mood-altering substances. I'm talking about inhalants. Don't give away everything, And then we have John G. Say something, John G. It's always good to have you as the co-host.
Hey, here's John G., your sidekick and co-host.
Okay. Welcome back to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast, where healing meets humor and recovery becomes possible. I'm your host, Hugs Not Drugs, and today we're talking about something often hiding in plain sight. Dr. Uggs gave it away already, inhalants. But Dr. Uggs, do the commercial. Get that out of the way so we can go straight through.
I'll be glad to. This is brought to you, this podcast is sponsored by John Forlenza-Bailey. He wrote 2 books. He's trying to sell them to break even. Please buy the book if you have money and you need it. The first one is the Road to Wellness Workbook. That's if you got a substance abuse problem. It's treatment on the cheap. You do a workbook with a mentor. You follow directions like that, and you'll have 30 days clean. What is the workbook? The workbook is designed to provide education, emotional support, and inspiration to persons suffering from addiction. It offers step-by-step lessons to people striving to turn their lives around regarding abstinence, relapse prevention, family dynamics, and self-assessment to continue to discover self day by day. Recovery's up to you. Mentors help. Journals help. You must exchange and surrender destructive behaviors for constructive ways of handling the day-to-day stressors and triggers of life. No one deserves to continue to suffer from active addiction. Get better and do the work. The other book that he wrote is more or less a fairy tale describing addiction. It's called The Transformation of Dr. Uggs. This John Forlenza-Bailey is pretty inspiring. The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is an original fairy tale that explains the progression of the disease of chemical dependency. It's not intended to be a story about blaming others for the acquisition of an illness. This fairy tale is intended to explain, not to blame. It is a story of discovery, insight, acceptance, and finally the right choices to live drug-free if one is chemically dependent. All right. I'm out. I will be offering pithy comments if they come up, but other than that, the commercial's over. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate that, Dr. Uggs. Barleycorn, say something. Yeah, I've seen many substances come and go, but inhalants, cheap, accessible, and deadly, they're a quiet storm. John G., what do you have to say about this? You've lived the experience.
Yes, I have, and I would have to say that inhalants really go back to my childhood. I remember the first time I had experienced hypoxia, which is actually, oxygen indebtedness that you get from doing some of these inhalants. I remember I was about 7 years old, and I was in a hallway in the apartment building I lived in Brooklyn, and one of my little friends said, "John, if you breathe real fast." So I did that, and then this kid got behind me, and then he grabbed me as if he was doing the Heimlich maneuver. And next thing I know, I passed out, and it was from, they cut off my oxygen supply. And I had this euphoric feeling that I ended up chasing for the next several decades afterwards. And so that was the first time I actually felt what it was like to have that oxygen debt and that sense of euphoria. And my actual first experience with inhalants was when I went to see the Beatles' Yellow Submarine animated movie, and I think this was late 60s. And I was about 9 years old, and I was with this friend of mine, this kid Joe, and was sitting there in the movie theater, and he took a rolled-up handkerchief, and he started putting airplane glue on it.
Mother of pearl.
And so he said, huff on this. So I did. And next thing I knew, I was lightheaded, and I'm watching this animation of Lucy in the sky with diamonds. And that was my first real experience with psychedelia, and just I was actually hallucinating while I was watching this movie, and it was just it was something like nothing I had ever experienced before. And then I remember afterwards, I had a pretty bad headache, and I felt kind of depressed afterwards. But I was real curious about that, and I knew it was bad, but no one told me it was bad. It wasn't because people were telling me like stay, I don't drink, and I heard people talking about there were kids in the neighborhood that were, I mean, I was living in a neighborhood in Brooklyn. I was watching kids injecting heroin, in the basement, so there was a lot of other stuff going on, and marijuana and these other drugs, and of course it was a working class neighborhood. Alcoholism was rampant. But inhalant use was really something in the closet. People didn't talk about it. Kids found out about it, but it was like the secret that was kind of out in the open, with the kids.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the origins of inhalant use. Inhalant use dates back to centuries. Even in ancient times, people inhaled vapors for altered states, for their for religious purposes. But modern inhalants like glue and spray paint and cleaning fluids became widely abused in the 20th century, and that's when you started using because it was cheap and accessible. Barleycorn, you got any ideas? Yeah, I do. Unlike alcohol or opiates, these were designed for the body, but people adapted them anyway. Why do people use inhalants? I think, John, you touched on that a little bit. Was it for escape?
Yes, it was. It was escape to change the way we felt. It was to chase euphoria, and and it was really cheap, and it was easy to come by. People didn't notice it, and now that I think back, at that point in my early teen years, it was a little bit more rampant than. I remember a lot of kids would go out, and it got to the point that when you went to the local hobby store, you had to buy a model. They wouldn't just sell you the glue.
Mm-hmm.
So kids would buy like a little, $1 or $2 airplane model just so they could get either, the tester's glue or the Wellwood glue. And, some kids, instead of just using handkerchiefs, I remember when I was about 17 or 18, I was working as a lifeguard, and one of the older lifeguards just started joking about it, and he said, yeah, Wellwood glue #2 bag, referring to the old style paper bags. And I remember as a kid working in a deli, we didn't have plastic bags. Everything was paper. And the smallest was the 1 tiger bag, and the 2 tiger bag was a little bit bigger, and that was just big enough that you could roll up the top of it and then put glue all over the bottom of it, and then it would just fit over your face and you could huff on it. And there was quite a bit of that going on. Of course, there were other kids that I found out were sniffing carbona, which was a cleaning solvent, and that has like volatile hydrocarbons in it, and was it like trichloroethylene is in it, and this other stuff that it gets in your lungs and it just expands.
Yeah.
And really, really dangerous.
Yep.
I know of a couple of kids that actually passed away because this stuff, and then also breathing aerosols. And the aerosols are at many degrees below zero. So once they enter into your lungs, they could expand, and you could get an embolism, and you could literally die on the spot. You could get instantaneous death from this stuff.
Yeah, Barleycorn here. You're telling me people risk brain damage for something that smells like a gas station bathroom, for God's sake.
Yes.
And it's sad, but it's true. And I'm thinking of one of my good friends in school. I was in the 8th grade, and I wasn't going to high school yet. I went to an all-Catholic high school, and he was going to be my mentor of sorts, and he died doing inhalants, and it could have been one of his first times doing it. I don't know, but it was all his classmates came to the church where I was an altar boy, and I helped say the mass that and said goodbye to him that way, and instead of hello, it was goodbye. So this really does things to the brain. Inhalants deprive the brain of oxygen and disrupt neurotransmitters. The effects can include dizziness, euphoria, hallucinations, but also permanent damage. Barleycorn, you got something? Yeah, it's a fleeting high. I almost turned into Dr. Uggs there. It's a fleeting high for a lasting cost. Some risks are brain cell death, memory loss, organ damage, sudden sniffing death syndrome. That's what my friend had. Yes, it can happen for the first time.
Wait, first time? This is not a trial run, it's a final exam here.
That's right. It's a permanent solution for a temporary situation.
Yes, sir.
You know, and I remember that I got away from that because other drugs, as I got into my earlier teen years, there were things like acid was around and mescaline and these other hallucinogens were out. And of course, I was smoking marijuana at that time and even smoking, hashish and opium. There was the need to do, for me personally, to get involved with, I just got away from that. I just kind of switched horses. But I remember it was my senior year, there was a song that came up by the Ramones, and I used to go see the Ramones at the Rock Palace in Brooklyn. It's like 1977, and they had a song called Carbona Not Glue. Carbona Not Glue, that was the chorus. And I remember a bunch of raging maniacs, in this place just yelling, Carbona Not Glue, Carbona Not Glue.
How are you still alive?
And then... But then, I remember when I was about 19, 20 years old, there was a new, it was like there was like a kind of like a resurgence of inhalants. And then I remember particularly when I was working in Midtown, I was working as a firefighter up there. And, there was this... And one of my main running buddies was the doorman at Studio 54. And my brother-in-law had turned me on to this stuff, amyl nitrite. And you could get it in a little bottle. And you would sniff it, and it would accelerate your heart rate, and it would give you like a quick buzz. So the joke amongst myself and my friends that were doing this, we would say, hey, let Amy do it. We'd be at the bar drinking, and then you just go into the bathroom. And then when I got to Studio 54, and I found out that this was something that was really rampant among gay men, and I was not aware of that at that time. And so it was this amyl nitrite, and it was getting real big in all the clubs. But when I went to 54, it was pretty prevalent. And it got to the point that one night at Studio, and this was a regular occurrence, because we have another friend that used to work there, and my friend who was the doorman there, and we would go in, and these were like the original raves in the early 80s. And I remember it was about 1983, and I was in the club, and there was this song blasting, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, Don't Do It. And they actually had a canister of amyl nitrite that was suspended above the dance floor, and they opened it up and they just hoisted it up above, and the whole club smelled like amyl nitrate.
Yeah, this is so crazy because it not only opens up the neurotransmitters and the hypothalamus, you're feeling great, you got all this euphoria, but it also heightens sexual activity, and that's another addiction. So you're really playing with the devil in the pale moonlight, as the Batman movie goes, and it's really a lot of triggers. AIDS came out around this time too,
Yes.
and
This was during the AIDS epidemic, and like you say, this is tied to sexual compulsivity. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's stop there with that and talk
Yeah.
about recovery, because you did get recovery. It's possible, and it starts with awareness and continues with support. Can you talk a little bit about uh, what helps, like medical evaluation, brain and body, behavioral therapy like CBT and DBT, support groups, recovery communities, safe environments, removing access to triggers, rebuilding purpose and connection. Can you give us a little summation of that, John? Because you, God bless you, you've been in recovery, what, 36, 37?
Yeah, 37, going on 38. Yeah.
There you go, brother.
And yeah, and it's interesting because some of those other methods I had tried, the cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, I had some of my counselors were aware of the trauma that I had undergone I'd been hit by cars twice when I was young. I had been in a lot of fights. I was, sexually abused. And then after all that, I go on to, even during that time, I was working as an ocean lifeguard. I was dealing with drownings, then became a firefighter, dealing with death on the fire department and having been trapped, about 4 times as a fireman. I had a lot of trauma and I was trying to deal with that. So I was seeking therapy as a way to improve my relationship with my then second wife. My first relationship, disintegrated as a result of my substance abuse. And it was interesting because I was at the counseling service unit of the New York City Fire Department, and I met my friend Terry, who was the doorman at 54. And he was in recovery at that point, and I was, still in denial about this. I was blaming my other problems for what my primary disorder was, which was my addiction, and it was not being properly, it was not being properly dealt with in the realm of counseling. So he looked at me and he says, John, we have a chair here with your name on it when you're ready to come in. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, we got an AA meeting over here. And I was like, well, that's obviously not for me, And then as things got a little bit more desperate, and then I got to the point where, a point of spiritual bankruptcy where death would have come as a welcome friend, or as they say, a state of pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And I cried out for help. And I went back to that counseling service unit, but then they sent me to detox, which I needed at the time. And then went through, 4 weeks of rehabilitation, a 30-day rehab, and then got heavily involved in the 12-step fellowships. And through the process of self-examination that I was afforded, as are millions of other people that have been through the program, and getting together with people that had experienced the same things that I had experienced, it was like the lights were on and someone was home, because now I was talking to people that intuitively and inherently understood what I was going through, as opposed to talking to a counselor who may or may not be able to truly relate to my experience. I no longer had a place to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And I found some amazing men, particularly my first sponsor, George. And this guy, he was 66 when I met him, and I was 29. And this man treated me like I was his own son, or better than. And so that was how I addressed this, through going through the process of self-examination. That was the only thing that really, because putting down the substance, that was just the first part. Because I'd used substance my whole life to deal with life, and now I had to put that stuff down, but I had to learn how to live life on life's terms without the use of a substance.
Yeah, this connection is the antidote to isolation. And when the student is ready, and you were ready, there wasn't anything that was going to stop you. The teachers appear. And George was a great teacher for you, wasn't he?
He was amazing, and like you say, what I learned here was that the opposite of addiction, or alcoholism and addiction, is not necessarily abstinence, and it's not even just sobriety alone. What it is it's connection.
Mm-hmm.
And we develop this connection with other people, and then through that, we learn how they developed a connection with their own higher power, which we choose to call whatever concept of God that is. Of course, mine is very broad, but then we develop a relationship, and then we start to understand the truth about ourselves. I came in, I was a hopeless dope addict. Then I became a dopeless hope addict, and today I have faith, which is hope with a track record.
Okay. All right.
So instead of huffing and puffing, we start hugging and healing.
That's
He,
right. Hugs, not huffs.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly, Dr. Uggs. Exactly, John. Let's close this up. If you or someone you love is struggling with inhalants, know this: you're not alone, and recovery is real. The high isn't worth your life, but your life is worth recovery. If you need further help on this, plug into a resource called SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Systems Administration, and that helpline is 1-800-662-HELP. That's Samson Helpline, 1-800-662-HELP. I think that wraps it up. Any final thoughts, John? John G?
That wraps it up. I'm just grateful for the opportunity that we have here to share our experience, strength, and hope so that other people don't have to continue to suffer. And it's a blessing to be able to watch people get well and to get well ourselves. So it's just been an amazing journey, and I'm glad that I'm getting to share it with you today, John, and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hugs Not Drugs, remember, this podcast is here weekly, and we appreciate everybody that listens. Thank you, Pat, for all your help on this edit. And I just want to say one more thing. Don't use no matter what. Call somebody up. If it's a good enough reason, well, it's never a good enough reason. Stay clean. We love you. Take care. Go, Harry. Take us out, brother.